Hello and welcome to KitPlus TV. Now, when we last spoke to one of our guests today, we're in the midwinter. The COVID situation was improving slowly, but still what unknown with the success of vaccinations yet to be proved at the time. And the outlook for face-to-face events was questionable for the immediate future. We were, after all, in a full lockdown, and that was only just over 2 months ago.
Yeah, and now, in the UK at least, we find ourselves approaching the remainder of 2021 with renewed hope that things might just be able to get back to some sort of normality, albeit with extra measures in place. One such activity that the industry treats as normal are our trade shows, and today we're getting an update from IBC about the Amsterdam event in September. So we're really pleased to welcome back Mike Crimp, CEO of IBC, and he is joined today for a first appearance on KitPlus TV by IBC Director Steve Connolly.
Now, we've got lots to get through, with many questions coming from our LinkedIn post where we simply asked, what would you ask IBC? So Mike, if we can start with you. Last time we spoke, there was a plan A and a plan B. Plan A being the show in September as usual, and plan B being a show in December. So what's the current thinking on those dates, and how are plans for this year's show progressed since we last spoke in February?
Yeah, hi guys, thanks for inviting us back. Those plans are progressing well. We are just entering into a period of consultation, really. We had a meeting with our Global Council of Broadcasters on Monday evening to get their feedback, and we had a press conference yesterday asking the press to help us fire out our message regarding the consultation. So we're doing a survey of visitors, and we're working with the IABM to do a survey of exhibitors as well. So so that's where we are, and the reason I mentioned that to answer your question is we're asking people to have an open mind about either of those dates. It's our job to choose which is the safest and most valuable, but we're asking people what they would prefer, how they can get there, let them know about our safety plans, to ask how they feel about that. So a whole range of questions around that. So both plans have moved forward a lot logistically, and now we're looking for feedback on those so we can continue to refine them.
Have you got any clues as to when you might be able to confirm the final date? When does it remain? Because previously you said what date you were going to confirm it. Does it remain the same? Are you going to do this?
Yeah, it remains the same. So the big driver for us to decide is, at the moment, is the exhibitor's timeline for being prepared for the show, and of course the financial commitments along that line. So 2nd of June is a key date for us, because the exhibitors' commitment to their IBC stand ramps up to sort of 100% commitment, and then all their commitments to building their stand and booking their flights and all of those things kick in. So whichever date it is, it's roughly two months beforehand that the costs really ramp up. When we get all the information back, there is a possibility of us pushing it back a little way and actually just delaying the exhibitor's commitment to the 100%, which we would consider doing if there's not a clear-cut answer, but the survey results suggest that give it a few more weeks and people will be clearer. Otherwise, we'll make a decision around June 2.
So Mike, just sticking with you for one more, how do you see the event looking to the visitor? I mean, more outside space, undercover networking outside and things like that?
For a visitor coming, I'll run through it really quick. I mean, if you start by registering, it normally takes 5 minutes, but it will probably take 10, because we're asking health and safety questions, so that will underpin our track and trace to make sure everyone's safe. And it'll also, some of the questions will be marketing questions that will kind of power our hybrid element of it, which probably Steve will go into a little bit later. We're using things like uploaded photo ID and facial recognition to speed up people's entry into the venue. And the reason for that is there will be health and safety checks and excuse me, and some testing before entering IBC. The big difference, I think, in terms of the experience once you get inside is that there'll be a perimeter. So it'll be a bit like going to a festival or a big sports complex. So if you smoke or you're partial for a beer or you feel safer having outdoor meetings, you'll be able to do that in that usual RAI territory. So you'll go in and out of the building quite easily once you're inside the perimeter. Within the halls, there are much wider aisles and a one-way system. Currently, the rules are that you have to wear a mask if you're standing up and moving around. But if you're sitting down and networking, as long as you're 1.5 meters apart, you don't need to wear the mask. So there are a few restrictions, but in a sense, we're all getting used to those. And also the Dutch government have got a lot of trials going on at the moment about reducing those as things get safer.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, we'll address some of those in maybe a bit more detail. But Steve, question for you then: remote production. This remote word. It's been a buzzword for us over the last year. And the question just raised: remote participants. This hybrid event thing that you're doing. How's it going to work in reality?
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt. And everyone's talking about remote production, but also everyone's talking about hybrid events. No one's actually done one yet. So what does that look like in practice? I suppose IBC's vision is to bring the live IBC experience from Amsterdam to as wide a global audience as possible, whether that's in Amsterdam or remotely in people's offices or in the homes. But we'll be using Expo Platform as our digital portal, and that's a well-established platform for large-scale digital events. Attendees will be able to register using a single sign-on process that will give them access to either or both the venue itself in Amsterdam, and it will give them their login for the digital portal. If you're an exhibitor, you'll be able to upload content onto your profile, arrange one-to-one video meetings with remote attendees, in addition to obviously their appointments on site. I suppose it's powered by some AI functionality that will give recommendations based on attendees' registration data that Mike mentioned earlier, and that will relate to other exhibitors, to products, to sessions, content sessions, events, and of course individual attendees. And one of the other cool things about the portal is it will also aggregate all your leads as an exhibitor, whether they're on site in Amsterdam or indeed through the digital portal. So yeah, we're very excited about using Expo Platform this year.
Steve, I've seen mention of 5 show floor stages. Can you explain what these are?
Yeah, absolutely. We're particularly excited about these because the plan had been to launch them in 2020 before everything obviously got cancelled. But the vision behind those is to bring more exhibitor content to the show floor and help exhibitors demonstrate thought leadership, but also generate leads, which is obviously paramount importance to most of them. So yeah, as you say, there's 5. There's a showcase theatre, and that's a large 250 plus capacity theatre that's going to be in Hall 12. And that'll be used to work with exhibitors to design a content programme and acquire a targeted audience. And all the content from that specific theatre will be streamed online through the digital portal. And then there's a series of smaller themed show floor stages across the venue, and they're looking to cover content across the industry supply chain, really. So I'm going to try and remember them all now. There's a live and remote production, interestingly enough, production and posts, there's the content supply chain, and finally the content everywhere stage that's going to be focusing on D2C, OTT and streaming. And those stages specifically will offer exhibitors the opportunity to be part of a curated panel discussions or on specific topics, or to have standalone sessions. So yeah, particularly excited about those this year. And those smaller stages will have all their content captured and recorded and be available on VOD through the digital portal. So they're an intrinsic part of our hybrid proposition this year.
Okay. And for those of us that can get there, I'm kind of interested how big the exhibit is going to be. Are we going to occupy all the halls, do you think? I mean, compared to let's compare it, I guess, with last IBC. What sort of space are we taking up physically?
Yeah, we're taking the vast majority of the space. For those regulars to IBC, we won't have the pavilions this year, but the plan in 2020, because we'd extended one of the halls to the easternmost side, Hall 5, that's being extended. So Content Everywhere is moving in there. So the only notable difference is you won't see the pavilion in front of the venue, but we will be using all the other halls. So yeah, it'll be a 13-hall event. So by anyone's standards, still a significant show.
So Steve, from a practical point of view, you've potentially over 1,000 exhibitors at IBC, and many of them will be watching this. And the question raised was about the build-up times for exhibitors in order to ensure social distancing and so on. What stage are you at with confirming the setup arrangements and possibly allowing more time for this? As I guess it's not just about the show that visitors see, it's about the whole process from setup to derig.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, fortunately, IBC has quite a long build-up time compared to other shows. So at the moment, we don't anticipate having to extend either build-up or breakdown times. But attendee safety is obviously the most important factor in our planning. And we'll be enforcing the obvious health and safety protocols like face masks and social distancing throughout the venue in build-up and in breakdown. Exhibitors and stand builders will all have access to the full health and safety regs and all the rules for our manual, of course. But based on previous years, numbers in the venue are relatively low during build-up and breakdown and tend to be naturally staggered anyway. But we are still determining whether a more structured staggering of access will be required. But we'll announce those details in due course over the coming weeks and months.
Okay.
Yeah, things change as as it goes on. Situations become easier or more difficult. Yeah. What about sort of plans to in your manual, in the exhibitor manual, and because this is from a visitor experience, it's quite important. Are you going to offer exhibitors any additional advice in stand design, so to speak, for safety?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're updating our exhibitor COVID guidelines and stand guidelines and regulations on the website on a regular basis. And they're put together with advice from the RAI, regards from local Dutch authorities, but also with IBC's stand building contractor, Abraxas, who we've worked with for a number of years and many exhibitors will be more than familiar with. And Abraxas are also able to provide exhibitors with individual support as part of that service this year. So they're on board to answer any questions exhibitors might have. But yeah, short answer is absolutely yes. It's going to be of significant importance to clients this year, and we're very appreciative of that.
So Steve, this is probably another question on the same theme that we had asked, in that exhibitors need to obviously staff their stands appropriately, and they're probably going to face some issues with some staff not being able to, or for whatever reason not willing to travel. Are IBC going to be transparent with exhibitors as we approach the date in respect to registration, so they can suitably staff their stands with the right number of people, i.e. not too many?
Yeah, of course. No, it's a fair question. And totally understand the point being made around transparency, and we want to make sure expectations are aligned across the board. But our surveys that are rolling out now, in fact, and over the next couple of weeks, will help inform those expectations, and we'll be able to kind of keep people updated. But yeah, we want to manage people's expectations, and we understand the need for transparency. Hopefully, those surveys will help inform those expectations a little clearer over the coming weeks.
And for each of you now, I guess there's we're saying we need to reduce any transmission points, and we've heard rumor that you're stopping paper. How far is this going to go? What are we? Is it sort of no business cards? Are we going all the way here?
Yeah, good point. But yeah, we are keen to reduce any potential transmission sources where we can, and of course, historically, there's been a lot of brochures and print material being distributed at IBC. For example, IBC has taken the decision to make the IBC Daily a purely digital edition this year. So that'll be in digital format, and downloads of the Daily and other magazines and journals can be done incredibly effectively through QR codes and apps around the venue, and of course via our digital portal. So, and then the other factor is that it helps improve our green footprint as well. So a good year to to trial that. So yes, we're asking exhibitors to support that initiative as well.
So I guess that's going to be a big change to the traditional magazine alley that we've been so used to seeing in previous years.
It will, and we'll work with those publishing partners and magazine partners to find alternatives, as I say, again, through QR codes or through apps, to make sure that distribution that they rely on is still accessible, but accessible in a digital format to potentially a much larger audience.
Absolutely. So Mike, this question is something of a moving target, really, and largely out of your hands, but it's a good conversation to have, and you touched on it. Vaccine passports, sometimes controversial, but it's probable that people will need proof of vaccination to get into the country just to travel. So it's a logical step that you're going to probably implement some sort of system for people to prove that they're safe to come in. What is the plan there in detail?
Well, as you say, two things. First of all, it's out of our hands because it's a public health and safety issue for the Dutch government and Amsterdam. So we'll follow the rules, and we're working closely with them. And secondly, as you say, it's a bit of a moving target. I mean, it's very likely that everyone's going to need to be tested to enter the Netherlands anyway, or to do air travel in general. Of course, it depends where you're coming from. So most people who have had a test, or I think almost everyone, if not everyone, will have had to have tested before they arrive in Amsterdam. And we will be looking for proof of vaccination or testing before people can come into the venue. What that exactly looks like is the subject of a conversation with the health authorities in the city at the moment. We're really keen to see what happens in Mobile World Congress. That event seems to be coming together and progressing, and clearly they've got a similar issue. How do you make sure that everyone is safe once they're in the venue, and what's the process for getting in? All I can say is that we're working with all the authorities, and we're working to the gold standard. It would be great if we could rely just on vaccine passports, but as a general term, I guess vaccine passports, people are starting to think of that as having some element of testing or immunity, because you've already had the disease. And so what the rules are for that is not something that we want to dabble with. We're just saying to the government and the authorities, you're the experts, what do we need to do to keep everyone safe?
So Mike, we mentioned so far that you do the visitor surveys, and I think there's also an exhibitor survey as well. Can you tell us the sort of things that people are going to be asked, and I guess ultimately what's the major things that you're going to gain from this?
The exhibitor survey is being done by the IABM, and that's not really kind of based on the individual. That's going to the organisational decision maker, because that's clearly a conversation about exhibiting, and for those who've signed up, what kind of dates that they might be looking at. For those who haven't signed up, what are the things that IBC needs to do to convince them. But that survey will also look a bit more widely at what hybrid might mean and digital might mean in the future. The IABM asked this last year, and the results were interesting, but they were all theoretical. In the last year, people have got more involved in digital and hybrid, so there's actually something to compare it with, and people's experiences have moved on. So I think the IABM one will be really aimed at how people were feeling about exhibiting at IBC, and what they're planning to do with regards to big events, and their marketing activity as we move forward through 2021 and a bit beyond, which is helpful. The visitor one is is really, IBC are making some strong statements and about wanting to keep everybody safe and for it to be a valuable event. So we just want to check how people are feeling about how we're doing with that, and what issues that they see around it, so we can continue to be aligned and improve. But then there are also a number of factors like how do they feel about traveling, what would make them feel more comfortable in terms of an entry policy, what is their company's policy likely to be, what do they need to show their company to say that it's okay for them to travel, and what do they think the policy will be on traveling on aeroplanes or cars internationally. So we've just got a picture, and of course we can then map that picture against their demographics. So we'll start to understand what the audience looks like and what the size of the audience is likely to be, and of course that will feed back into some of the questions you've already asked us about, like how many people will be there, and what will the geographical focus be, and how will the content meet the audience, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that kind of makes me think, who are you going to get to? For this is visitor only now. Who's going to answer it? Are you going to be sending out? You probably almost certainly will be sending it out to previous attendees, previous registrations. But can anyone answer it if they're interested in coming for the first time?
Yeah, we're interested in anyone who's a stakeholder in our community, if that makes sense. So we've gone to a really wide group of press to spread the news, and thanks to those guys, because some of those stories are already out there and surveys open, and people have been answering already overnight. So that's good. We've got a database of people who have been to IBC, and another database of people who have registered for IBC and not come, and another database of people who are prospects for IBC, and we will be emailing all of those with a request for them to take part in a consultation. That, from our database of the community that we have from IBC and IBC 365, is around 250,000 people that we're going to be emailing. So it's quite a substantial group that we're looking at there. And last year we had really good levels of response. So that's where we're going with it, and so we're quite excited over the next week or so to see what those results say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mike, we understand you're obviously friendly rivals with NAB in Las Vegas, but is there further insight into how their show, which is now moved from April to October, how that may affect visitor and exhibitor attendance at IBC, I mean, irrespective of whether you do go for September or December?
Yeah, I think, to really know, you probably have to get NAB in the room as well, so we could kind of see it from both sides. From my point of view, I think there are going to be far more significant factors like those mentioned in the survey earlier about whether people can't come or can come to IBC than the actual date of NAB. I think it may well be that the idea that IBC is serving EMEA becomes true more due to travel restrictions than the fact that NAB is a month after. I mean, I certainly will make every effort to go to NAB if I can, and I think if people will look at NAB if they're in the US, and if they're in Europe, they might look more favourably on a shorter trip to IBC. So we'll see. I mean, it's a big variable. I get the point of the question, because it's quite a big change. To be frank, I don't suppose they had much chance or choice on the date for them to choose, and they've got to do what they're going to do. So we're friendly rivals, and everyone in the industry, I hope, can visit one or both, get what they need out of it, and then we'll move on to 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably in 22 hopefully they'll go back to April. it was a good balance that for so many years. So, but back to you. I sort of rounding up a little bit. Let's go for the visitor experience a bit. Can you give us a bit more detail about me as a visitor turning up, walking? I've registered. I've gone through the slightly longer registration process because we've got some questions. When I walk up and go into the halls, what's going to happen? How do I get in? What happens when you're in the halls?
Yeah, good question. And I spoke a little bit earlier about how you get into the perimeter. So if you're partial to a cigarette or a drink, and the beach, that will be open, and then in that common area there'll be a lot more kind of catering and outside areas. So the fresh air part of it will clearly be important. Inside there'll be wide aisles and a one-way system that goes around the show. That's been planned very carefully. So it's kind of not like a Grand Prix circuit. If you start to break down just past the pit lane, you've got to go all the way around back, to get back in the pit. It will be a system where you can kind of circle around inside some of the halls. I mean, we're aware of how far people have to walk because we have to do the same. So I think we're all going to have to walk a little bit further, but we'll do our best to minimise that. I think that's best to have wide and safe aisles in one direction, than to save a few steps by walking straight towards each other.
I think it's going to be really interesting going forwards to see the changes that you're making out of necessity and whether those remain for future shows. I mean, an IKEA-style one-way system with some shortcuts maybe, and the perimeter really sound like a good idea for future shows maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's not just in those areas as well. There's hybrid, and then there's our content program. We talked about the perimeter. There's all kinds of different things. I mean, for me, to use a kind of rugby union analogy, if the referee calls a penalty and tells you to play the advantage, you may as well do something. You may as well try and score a try, because the worst that can happen is when the whistle blows, you're going to end up back where you were with the ball in your hand. So this is an opportunity to try some different things and think differently. And one of the big messages that we're trying to get out to everyone, and especially exhibitors in some ways, is like, maybe you just need to think about IBC differently this year. Maybe think about, how you exhibit and what you actually need to do. And if there's every year where you can try something and if it works, brilliant, and if it doesn't, then you're going to be forgiven for it. It's certainly this year. So for me, it's a chance to try, and that's just kind of what I'm like and what my team are like, really. So that's what I've been saying to everyone. Let's just try some new things and see what happens.
Actually, I'm wondering, just a final question on that. You mentioned again the hybrid event, and one thing we haven't touched on, which I'd like to have done, is the sessions. What goes on in the forum, etc. How's that going to pan out from a hybrid point of view? Am I going to be buying access again to see online content as usual?
Well, you're close to getting an exclusive there, but I can't actually tell you right now. If you invite us back again, we will tell you, because we're just finalising all of those plans. And if you imagine that we've got 5 stages and 2 conference rooms in our plans, then we're at the stage of all the production logistics, because all of that's got to go live or VOD across all of those different venues. So we're at the final part of that jigsaw puzzle, and we're working with our comms agency to kind of keep feeding the stories into the market. So the next big story will be about how we're going to handle our content and our conference, but it's something I have to keep up my sleeve for today, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much for your time today, Mike and Steve. And it seems like we're definitely going to catch up in the not too distant future to see how things are panning out. And of course, if you're both free on the 6th of July, then you're both very welcome to come to the KitPlus show in Media City, which we're planning right now. And although on a tiny scale compared to IBC, we do appreciate what you and your team are doing behind the scenes to make IBC 2021 work for the industry.
Well, thank you. And I will be there if I can, because the shows are smaller, but the beers are the same size.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah, and we'd like to thank those of you that took the time to ask a question on LinkedIn. We fully appreciate it's an uncertain time and the return to normality will take a while, but having these open and honest conversations with industry event leaders can only help people decide what to do. So thank you very much to everyone. Thanks also to Mediaproxy, who support KitPlus TV. You can find out more about them at mediaproxy.com. And finally, don't forget, you can listen to KitPlus TV on the move with our podcast. We'll see you next time.